What is going on, everybody? We are back for another edition of some wrestling conversation. It's so weird not to say like we're Tornado Tag Podcast, but we're back from the Anthony Blackwell Jr. YouTube channel. Joined once again by my main guy, Brian BP Burke, whatever we call him these days.
Yeah, same thing.
But we have another fan requested topic, two back to back, and they may know each other.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Yes. So
well, thankfully we're gonna be talking about something light and airy and fun. And
no, we're not. Unfortunately, no, that's not the case. But when this was presented to us, that like, hey, this would be an interesting topic for you guys to talk about. You have already tackled this topic before.
A long time ago, yeah, and not in a way where I would like a do-over. You've done enough with podcasting where, it's just like anything else. It takes a little while to get good, to the degree that you get good at something.
Yeah.
So I do a podcast, Murder My Dude, new episode coming out in about 4 hours, and one of the early episodes we did, the episode that's coming out is going to be episode 142. And I'm going through the archives now as I speak. And episode 5 of Murder My Dude was Wrestling My Dude. Yeah. And back then we did a few topics and we didn't go as deep into them. And that wrestling episode covered the death of Bruiser Brody in Puerto Rico, a very famous one, probably the most famous one, the Chris Benoit double murder-suicide, and also what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is the death of Nancy Argentino.
Not slicked back, just pulled up.
You have long sideburns and your hair slicked back.
Yeah. So this is where, when you are really in love with a sport, or you're in love with a team, or you kind of build that, or a business, you kind of build that, like, everything's awesome. I love everything about what we do here, and professional wrestling has definitely been that niche for us, you longer than me. But there are things that have happened in the business that aren't good, and it's good to talk about them, and it's good to learn from them, and so we can better ourselves as people, or maybe make changes so they don't happen again. And that's kind of what that episode was different situations in professional wrestling where things weren't good.
Yeah, and I mean, wrestlers are people, and sometimes people do bad things. There's no sugarcoating it. And so yeah, and I mean, there's that whole series on Vice, The Dark Side of the Ring. This was an episode. This was an episode that really kind of dropped a bombshell in this case when it aired. And and you got to remember, like, I've read a lot of books about wrestling, and it was a different time. This all happens. The case we're going to be talking about tonight, it all happens about 40 years ago. This happened on May 11th, 1983. I was in my mom's belly at the time, so I wasn't even born yet. And wrestling was still house show driven. Obviously, it's on TV, but it's a house show driven business. You're making towns, you're living on the road. It was a hard life. It was a hard life, and the people in it lived hard. If you read any wrestling books from that time, most of them are talking about they would buy a case of beer, put the beer in the car, they would drink, and like every wrestling book I've ever read from that time was talking about drinking and driving and getting in the fights, and it was a rowdy, testosterone-fueled existence.
Drugs, alcohol.
Yeah. And none of this is to explain away or forgive behavior that is unforgivable. But yeah, it was wild times, and there was probably no one more wild in the WWF, in the New York territory, than Jimmy Snuka. He played a wild man on TV, and he was a wild man behind the scenes as well.
Yeah. And this is a guy too that they talk about in the documentary. Did not read or write English. He came from the islands and came over here.
He was a little kayfabe, but he couldn't read.
Yeah,
and he didn't have a driver's license either.
Yeah, so he was he was a little different. You know, I mean, in that aspect, there was a lot different there too, because you know, it's when all you know is one thing in professional wrestling. That's essentially your lock in. You know.
Yeah, and he would be one of those guys that they would like a handler, so to speak.
Yeah.
And for a while, it was Buddy Rogers. Buddy Rogers, the Nature Boy, the first WWF champion. He was Snuka's manager on TV, and he was one of those managers that also kind of had to manage him in real life too.
And that worked out great. No issues, and he stayed there forever.
No, Buddy had some of his own issues.
Yeah.
Buddy had liked a little bit of the
Pro wrestling.
the nose candy.
Yeah. I would say pro wrestling back then, but we still have people who enjoy that nose candy.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. And look, their locker rooms are doing fine, aren't they?
Yeah, elite.
So yeah, Jimmy Snuka is known as somebody that's a little hard to control, and he needs supervision. And enter Nancy Argentino, and Nancy Argentino is at the time Jimmy Snuka's girlfriend. And it's so funny just talking about this. I was thinking of a conversation we had with a veteran of the wrestling industry. I'm not going to name names. We were talking to a guy who is old school and really is about that life. Like, he's not like about that life. He's not running around driving drunk and doing coke and everything, but he understands what that life is. He's lived it. He's lived the wrestling life.
Fun fact, you know where Nancy met Jimmy?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
In the Dark Side of the Ring, she was a Rod. She hung out with the Rods crowd. Johnny Rods.
Her sister, I believe, was engaged to Johnny Rods.
Yeah.
Yes. Somebody very close to her, I believe it was her sister, was engaged to Johnny Rods, and that's how Nancy Argentino met Jimmy Snuka. But what I'm getting at is like there's a little bit of an equivalency to being in wrestling, especially at that time, and to being in the mob.
Yeah,
it's a closed society. They don't really tolerate outsiders. You're part of a brotherhood, and a lot of times you'll watch each other's back and look the other way, even if the person in your brotherhood is in the wrong.
Yeah, and
so Nancy becomes kind of I'm thinking back to The Sopranos, the Gumar, the girlfriend, but Snuka's married with kids at this time too. He's married to, I believe it's his first wife. I know it wasn't the wife he would have later in his life. He has kids, and he also has his girlfriend when he's on the road, who is they talk about road wives, but that's who you travel with. This was his road wife, even though they were in a relationship, but she would travel with him. She was a licensed driver. She could read. We're not talking about world class. Glenn Goza, RASSLAM, that's wrestling. You don't know about Glenn Goza, do you? That might be on the Tales from the Territory thing on Vice. Glenn Goza, we're gonna get on a weird side tangent here.
Love it. Let's do it.
Was a singer in the Dallas area. And when David Von Erich died, he made a song called Heaven Needed a Champion. And it was this tribute song to David Von Erich. And then his follow-up, the B-side, was Wrestling. And he's not even singing. He's just talking about, like, they want to do all this, but I'm going to wrestling. And they had him sing it in Texas Stadium. And if you look up Glenn Goza Wrestling, RASSLIN, that's wrestling, on YouTube, you'll find the song and have a laugh or two.
Yeah.
Side tangent over. So we're just kind of painting the picture. And Nancy Argentino, is, and she's only 23 years old. Like, obviously, earlier today we were talking about Sarah Lee, the Tough Enough winner, who tragically died today. Only 30 years old. She's like 3 kids.
Real quick, not to jump ahead a little bit here. It wasn't one of who famously got into an accident the night this all went down.
I don't remember.
Because I wasn't there. Now, this wasn't on Dark Side of the Ring, but wasn't there a story where
there was? Yes,
Snuka was in the hospital in the ER, and everyone thought Snuka was there because somebody wrecked their car and got hurt real bad.
Yeah,
and then they're like, "No, Snuka's here for a completely different reason."
Yeah, this is ringing very true, but I don't remember exactly who it was.
Because that's kind of where it put all the like a lot of the boys and Snuka in the same place at the same time when this was all going down. Because he was
Mhm.
running around the ER like talking to everybody and telling them more than he probably should have at that point in time.
Yeah, this does sound very familiar, but I don't remember who it was, and I'm having trouble Googling it on
The
the
only
fly.
reason that you said that you reminded me is when you said Von Erichsen, famous car crash, but it's not that car crash.
Well, no, there wasn't really a car crash with the Von Erichs. Carrie crashed as Eddie Gilbert.
Eddie Gilbert
Yeah.
crash. Yeah.
Yeah, Eddie Gilbert was in a car accident the same night. And this is all very local to us. This
Yeah.
all happens in Whitehall, Pennsylvania, which is like maybe 45 minutes south. It's right outside of Allentown. It's like maybe 45 minutes an hour south of us. And so back then, and we've talked about this on the old podcast a lot, the TV was basically taped in two places. It was either the Hamburg Fieldhouse, which we know very well, or the Fairgrounds in Allentown, which is where they were going to tapings for here. And to kind of jump to what happens here, on May 11th, 1983, Jimmy Snuka is in a hotel room in Whitehall, Pennsylvania.
The George Washington Hotel.
Yeah.
Which is like a huge, beautiful place from what I've seen photos of.
And so, and this happens May 10th, but then May 11th is when everything happens, like that morning. So we get the George Washington Motor Lodge, yeah. And so Snuka, I believe, calls the front desk of the hotel and is trying to just get an ambulance out there because Nancy Argentino is gasping for air. She's in a bad way. And later that night, she's rushed to the hospital and she dies. And they had a very famous, very well-known coroner coming into the autopsy. She was declared dead at Lehigh Valley Hospital. And the cause of death was traumatic brain injuries. Dr. Isidore Michaelis is the doctor here.
A lot of cuts and abrasions on the body as well as bruising around the neck.
So yeah, traumatic brain injuries consistent with a moving head striking a stationary object. And because I guess like there's different breaks and different types of trauma where if you're hit with an object or your head hits into an object. So it was consistent with that. And there were also, as you were mentioning, there were also a lot of signs of what they called in the autopsy mate abuse, or I guess we call it now domestic abuse. So it showed that that Argentino had more than 24 cuts and bruises on her head, ear, chin, arms, hands, back, buttocks, legs, and feet. And it's believed that there was a significant delay in calling for medical attention, and that could have played a big role in her passing as well, where as soon as this trauma was inflicted, she was taken care of, it possibly doesn't result in a death.
Yeah.
And
now there was an incident previously with them where the cops were called, a police report was filed. Jimmy essentially fought cops and fought police dogs.
And it was treated as a joke in the it was treated as a joke in the media, in local newspapers.
The wild man goes wild.
Yeah, and we may have younger people watching this or people who aren't really as up to speed on this. I mean, I remember Jimmy Snuka from kind of his second run when he came back at WrestleMania 5, because again, this is all happening before I was born.
How old is Jimmy at this point in time?
Jimmy Snuka is I'm gonna guess he's in his 20s,
because she was 23.
Yeah,
crazy young. They're both crazy young here.
He would have been in 1983. He would have been close to 40. He was born in May of 1943.
She was 23. He was 40.
He was about to turn 40.
Wow, that changes things. I was about to say, remember when we were 23, and imagine if we had Jimmy Snuka fame and money. That changes things at 40.
and he's married with kids of his own at this point.
Yeah.
So Snuka is at this point. This is pre-Hulkamania. Hulk Hogan is in the AWA, and I think Rocky 3 came out in '83, or no, that came out in '80, I believe. But Snuka is, but there's no Hulkamania yet. Bob Backlund is the WWF champion, but you can make the argument that Jimmy Snuka is probably Backlund is kind of at the end of his run, and his title reign is showing his age. Jimmy Snuka is probably the most popular wrestler in the territory.
Yeah.
He's probably the. I mean, Backlund is kind of by default the number one babyface because he's a champion, but it's really Snuka. It's really Snuka. And he has this big feud with Don Morocco. Don Morocco is your top heel, and Snuka is beloved. Like, people loved Jimmy Snuka. And again, we're not excusing any behavior here, but if we're talking about the facts of the situation, Jimmy Snuka was as big as you can get as a wrestler at the time in this territory. And it's the biggest territory in the world and it's the biggest territory in the country. Because if you look at the cities in a territory, and this is why WWF always had the advantage. Like, if you look at Crockett, their big city is Charlotte and Greensboro. And then they have a few other smaller cities, Virginia and places like that, Richmond. The big cities for WWF, like their four biggest cities are some of the biggest cities in the country. It's New York, which is number 1, Philly, which is like 4 or 5, Boston, which is up there, DC, Pittsburgh. Those are like 5 of the 30 biggest cities in the country, and they're all their territory. So Snuka is the biggest baby face in the biggest territory. And yeah, he's got that kind of persona that he is a wild man. Like, his whole thing was he wrestled barefoot. They didn't portray Fijian or Samoan characters. Like, now we have some nuance. Like, Roman Reigns is portrayed as an intelligent guy. The Usos are portrayed as fairly intelligent guys. Back then, if you were a Pacific Islander, you were a savage.
If you were a person of color, you were high. There was an 80% chance you were playing some type of goofy stereotype. Yeah.
Yeah, like Alpha and Sika were the wild Samoans, and they were all but calling them cannibals on TV.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Snuka was a baby face, but he was like, okay, he's a wild man from the islands, and he doesn't really speak, and he's got the wild hair. He does the big flying splash. He's like a caveman.
Yeah.
He's like
and the crazy thing about this is the death of Nancy hasn't even been talked about yet, and probably Jimmy's most famous moment of his career doesn't happen yet either.
No, it's about to.
Yeah,
and he had and you're talking about him jumping off the cage and hitting Morocco.
I mean, when you think Jimmy Snuka, that's what you think.
I also think the coconut.
Yeah,
I think the coconut and Piper's Pit too.
Yeah,
and but yeah, Morocco, especially because it became such a big part of Mick Foley's career story.
Yep.
That he hitchhiked his way to Madison Square Garden to watch Jimmy Snuka fly off the cage against Morocco. But Snuka also I believe the first or one of the first ECW champions.
Wow.
If you want to go back, yeah, I'm pretty sure Morocco was one of the first too. So was Tito. But so let's kind of get down the brass tacks here. Nancy's pronounced dead, and the police are investigating Snuka because obviously it seems like this woman was beaten to death. Well, not beaten to death. There was some sort of trauma that caused her death that may have been inflicted by another person. And one thing that is always very suspicious in law enforcement is the idea that if you're changing your story, yes, Greg, and if you were Samoan, or in a lot of territories, if you were black, you have a very hard head. But it's more closely associated with Samoans, and because that lasted well into the 90s. Like, the head shrinkers were doing the I have a hard head. I think Rikishi, even in the 2000s, it's like, why would you headbutt a Samoan?
Yeah,
that would if a Samoan was a baby face, the heel would always try to headbutt them and hurt their own head. That was the gimmick.
I think I've seen Alpha Jr. do it in a match.
Well, yeah, it's a staple
as a baby. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, you try to ram their head into the turnbuckle, and
they're just
what are you doing?
Yeah,
are you stupid?
Love it. Pro wrestling.
Yeah, pro wrestling's great. But Snuka's story changed, they say, upwards of 6 times when he was talking to police. At first, he said he pushed her. There was and then the story he kind of settles on is that they were driving back to the motel.
They were driving to this. It was the drive from show to Allentown.
Okay,
Is essentially what he said.
they're making the towns.
So he's on his way to town. She pulls over. He pulls over for her to pee.
Yes, she has to pee, so they pull over on the side of the road, and she slips on the ice and hits her head. And that was kind of his story for a long time. That was the story he stuck to. And then this is covered on Dark Side of the Ring not that long after that, or not that long after Snuka passes away, and they interview the Tonga Kid, and the Tonga Kid recalls being in a car with Snuka and Nancy
on the way that night,
and they didn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like he may have been trying to concoct a story that was beneficial to him.
Even reports and testimonies of people in the ER room that night are all saying that Jimmy was telling stories where it was an accident. It was an accident. Like he was essentially telling a story as if it was like that ditch story never came in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the police investigation kind of just stops. Snuka, according to stuff people have really combed over this case. There's been really good reporting on this. The main guy who kept the story alive, because it was almost like, it reminds me a lot of the Bill Cosby story, where there was all this talk about it, and then you didn't hear anything about it for decades. And then something happened where it comes into the public eye again, bigger and badder than ever.
Yeah.
And like with Bill Cosby, that tipping point was Hannibal Buress, the comedian, talking about it. With this, the guy that kind of kept this story alive throughout the 90s and the 2000s into the 2000 teens was a reporter, Irv Mushnick, who I believe is related to Sam Mushnick, who was a legendary promoter of St. Louis wrestling. And Irv Mushnick he had looked into this at the time. He was very, very close to the Argentino family over the years, and he was one of those people that really, really wanted to shine some light on this. And they wanted to look at the interrogation of Snuka. They wanted to really look at the autopsy reports and everything, and to really see what had happened. And they say that Vince McMahon gets involved too. That Vince McMahon,
there's a meeting with Jimmy. It's not the interrogation, is it? Or is it the next day or a couple of weeks after? I don't know the timeline, but Jimmy is then pulled in for questioning. Vince shows up
with a lawyer
in a briefcase.
Mm-hmm. Well, the briefcase, I believe, was the other one in New York.
Oh, okay. Vince and Vince essentially, they have a conversation. Then there's a second meeting with Vince in a briefcase. Nothing was ever documented. Nothing was ever recorded. The police at that point in time said the reason why nothing was documented is because there was nothing significant to document. And then Jimmy was told by Vince, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and it was. I think a lot of that is conflated with the story in New York. So this is all happening in May of '83. In January of '83, there's police come to another hotel room in New York, and that's when Snuka's fighting the cops too, allegedly.
Yeah.
And there's an arrest there. But then Vince apparently made that all go away. And they say money may have changed hands even between Vince and Nancy Argentino, and Nancy's family wanted to try to push it, but it didn't happen. But you also got to know, like, the unfortunate truth is sometimes victims of abuse protect their abuser.
Yeah.
Especially when it's the first time. Oh, he snapped. That's not really him. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and that could have happened. We can't step into her head because she passed away, but they also said Vince appeared in New York at the New York investigator's office with a briefcase, theoretically full money. I think Snuka has even said this in his book.
Yeah.
He had a book that came out that was written with a ghostwriter, obviously.
And he said that Nancy ruined his life. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And so around 2013, this just and it was really hard to get like information and documentation on it because the case was never officially closed. It just went cold. So whenever the media would try to push the Whitehall police for details on all this, they would say we can't comment. It's an open investigation, even though it was an open investigation that really didn't go anywhere for 30 years. But Mushnick really pushed it, and books came out and everything like that. And the Argentino family obviously was a big pusher. That's because they wanted justice. They wanted justice for their sister. They wanted justice for their daughter. So that was a huge thing. And there was a wrongful death lawsuit in the 80s. So no criminal charges were filed, but there was a wrongful death suit. I believe it was I think I read somewhere that it was settled for like $500,000. I don't know if that's the exact
amount of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, there also was just kind of rewinding here that the family does stay in the dark side of the ring. That when she had her funeral, Jimmy walked in disheveled, essentially being handled by somebody because he was clearly probably not in the right state of mind. All speculation, all somebody else's accounts. He goes up to the casket, crying, apologizing. The dad pulls him away from the casket. He apologizes to him, and then he leaves. And then on the way out, he says to the mother, "She looks terrible," which I guess stuck with the family that he said that. And then the person who did the mortician, I guess they would be
coroner usually does the autopsy.
Well, not the autopsy, the person who prepped her for the
mortician, undertaker, funeral director.
Yeah, they said they tried everything, but they couldn't cover a lot of the bruises and the damage that was done to her. Like, so even the guy who was trying to prep her for her final resting was like, it wasn't good. Like, you know what I mean? It was a tough job to cover up bruises and scarring. So it was definitely something very, very visually apparent. And then the family physically sees this. Everyone sees it. And essentially the cops are like, nope, she fell in a ditch and hit her head. But they're like, what about everything else? And they're just like, nope, it's done. Forget about it. Move on with your life.
Yeah, I just found a good timeline for this because I was a little fuzzy on the dates.
Yeah.
June 1st. So a few weeks after this, the police interview Snuka with Vince McMahon present. And it's after that interview that the story kind of goes away.
Yeah.
So there has always been a group of people who said Vince paid off the cops and made it go away. Do we know this to be the case? No. No one knows.
All speculation, all rumor. Yeah.
As Bruce Pritchard would say, all rumor and innuendo.
Rumor and innuendo. Also, during this timeline on Dark Side of the Ring.
Yes, by the way, in '85, the Argentino family won a $500,000 lawsuit judgment and never saw the money.
Really? Wow. So also the Argentina family has claimed in the Dark Side of the Ring documentary that they were called by, let's just say, a promoter. They said, they didn't say who, and they said they were offered $25,000 just to if it would help them, essentially is how it was worded. And they're like, no. And they hung up the phone.
I think that may have been from the January case. That wasn't even from May. I think that was the initial case.
They made it seem like it was after the death.
Yeah, and they did a decent job, Dark Side of the Ring.
They have been criticized in the past for editing and moving things around. So that I personally
you're telling a story. You're telling a story as well as trying to inform people. So I understand.
Because even Tonga Kid, like when he said his side, it wasn't like he was. it was definitely, you could tell in the editing it was used, because then they went to the cops like, yo, the guy who just sat here said it. Do you never interviewed somebody to see if there was a third person in the car? And they're like, yeah, we did. And like, I mean, he's like, well, the guy who just sat here said he was in the car and nothing happened. And he's like,
Yeah,
whoops. You
and
know,
I think Tonga Kid has said it might have been a different time through, because they did go to Allentown every 3 weeks.
yeah,
So,
they're always on the road.
yeah,
I've only
he
been doing this a couple months, and I couldn't tell you every single thing that happened in a car ride on the way to a wrestling show. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, yeah, yeah.
they all kind of lump together.
Yeah, yeah, and imagine that being 7 days a week, pretty much every day of your life. That's how these guys were running back
Yeah,
then.
it's easy when you watch a documentary, and this is not me taking a side here or anything. I'm just saying it's really easy to say, you know, how do you not remember this, and this? And
Easily, it was 30 years ago.
that, and you're asking a guy who wasn't present for any of it. So you're asking a third party person who's the only one who's technically still with us, and you're asking him to account memories that it's, you know, 30, and I don't know, it's just tough. It's easy to
Yeah.
look on the outside and be like, well, that this looks shady, or this looks wrong, but it's like, it's not easy to
No, not at
nail it
all.
back down. Yeah. And then
Yeah,
good.
things like this always make me think of that movie Rashomon, the Kurosawa movie, which is a wonderful movie, and it's all about it's the same story told of a murder told like 5 different ways. It's from the victim, from the
Well,
perpetrator, from
what was
the
the one
witness.
episode that you covered on Murder My Dude, where the guy attacked a girl in an alleyway and 5 people watched the same crime and all told a different story?
Are you talking about Kitty Genovese?
Where essentially the guy like was like, he attacked her and
Yeah.
she ran from the scene, and he came back to the scene and
Yeah.
attacked
Yeah,
her,
it was
and multiple people seen the attack and all had a different story of how it went down.
yeah, that I think you're talking about the Kitty Genovese thing, because
That's
the other thing they always
crazy.
talk about that is, like, there were all these witnesses and nobody did anything to help. That's what they always say, but
Yeah,
it's not true.
but even the witnesses didn't have the same corroboration of what they seen.
Oh, that's why eyewitness testimony is
Bunk.
historically incredibly unreliable,
Yeah.
incredibly unreliable. So,
Times and dates absolutely bleed together. Yeah.
yes, they do, yeah, and so, yeah, nobody knows for sure if Tonga Kid was there. He could have been thinking of another trip, uh, because Nancy Argentino and Snuka were together for a year, almost, and Tonga Kid was starting to break in at that time, at least into that territory, and they if you look at the records, his first time wrestling in Allentown was March 3rd, which was, a week before. So it could have been the week before, and he very easily can conflate it 30, 35 years later.
Mhm.
So we're not that might not be the smoking gun some people think it is the
Yeah.
point we're trying to make. So yeah, in 85, there is that wrongful death settlement, and then it kind of goes very cold for a while until the Allentown Morning Call, which is the main newspaper down there. They do an investigative report in July of 2013, and they reveal this sealed, it was never released to the family, never released to the public, this sealed autopsy report of a crime that at this point, or an incident at this point that happened literally 30 years ago, that Nancy Argentino's death was officially ruled a homicide. Like, that was never fully known until 2013. And the district attorney at the time then decides, Jim Martin, he says his chief deputy DA is reviewing the file. That this is about 3 weeks later, and after about 6 months, they announce that they're going to bring the case to a grand jury in 2014. The wheels of justice do move incredibly slow, so it's not until 2015, September 2015, that Jimmy Snuka, I believe his real name is James Rear, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. He was officially in 2016 charged with, or rather in 2015 he was officially charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. And his defense team argues competency. At this point, he had already been diagnosed with stomach cancer. Uh, in this point, they just basically I've heard, you could hear radio interviews with Jimmy Snuka from like 1999, 2000,
He was on Opie and
and
Anthony.
yes, and that's the ones I think he was on Stern too, and the Opie and Anthony one, you can tell his faculties aren't complete.
Dude, when I met him, his faculty seemed incomplete.
Right. And that
Well,
was in the
that
90s, right?
yeah, 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah, because my brother was born because he was born 2002, 2000. I don't know. No, he was 90, but he by the time we took him to a wrestling show, he would have been much older.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
this would be around that time, yeah.
Yeah, it's but like the thing too is what they say in the documentary which about Snuka's personality is like he kind of kept to himself. He didn't really talk to a lot of people and he
Mhm.
stayed relatively quiet.
And you got to remember also in the 80s, we're still in kayfabe land. We're
Yeah.
still Jimmy Snuka is portraying on TV the wild man who isn't really a functioning member of society and doesn't talk. Like if you watch Snuka back in the day, he didn't talk. He'd go who,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that was his whole thing. He was the wild man who didn't speak, and so you kind of lived that gimmick. You if you were a foreign heel from Japan, you did the no English gimmick.
Yep.
People leaned on that well past kayfabe too. Tajiri would infamously give you the no English thing, and he speaks English fine. But the defense for Snuka is bringing up something that's been very much in the news lately. If you follow football, concussions and CTE. They
Yeah.
even played the famous clip from Piper's Pit in the Hamburg Fieldhouse of Roddy Piper just waffling Snuka in the head with a coconut. He lays it in. He bashes that coconut over Snuka's head.
Gotta get
And
the pop
saying,
somehow.
and saying like all this trauma. They call back to the Chris Benoit case, where CTE and brain injuries are blamed for. A lot of people blame that what he did on that. And then they also say like he's just not mentally competent to stand trial. So they have a competency hearing in 2016, and on June 1st, 2016, the judge says Jimmy Snuka is not mentally fit to stand trial. And a few weeks later, they ask Snuka to undergo mental health treatment. And that's all you really hear until the end of 2016 when you find out that Jimmy Snuka has gone into hospice. And the stomach cancer has advanced and is getting really, really bad at this point. And then at that stage, the decision is made not that long after that, a month after he goes into hospice, and he's pronounced that he had 6 months to live. It's eventually ruled that he's incompetent to stand trial. He's most likely not going to be competent to stand trial at any point. So the charges are just dropped. Obviously, the Argentino family is dismayed.
It sucks,
But
but I mean, like this is one of the cases where it's like,
yeah,
oh well, there it is again. There's corruption, but like, what was we already said later? He dies a week later.
yeah, literally, I think it was 2 weeks. But yeah, it's January 3rd that they make this ruling, and then January 15th he dies. So
Yeah, so
even if
that's
they would have put him on trial, he would have died before the trial was over.
and I don't know many people who are who you can argue that they were competent at that time
Yeah,
because it's just I don't know because like I said a week later he's
yeah,
gone.
yeah. And you have to, if you're facing trial, you have to be able to stand up for yourself, defend yourself, and it is more than likely that at that stage he wasn't able to do that. If you want to really be outraged at something, you should be outraged at the fact that this wasn't really handled at the time, that this wasn't handled in the mid 80s when all this investigation was going and they sat on this autopsy that ruled the death a homicide, and we know that somebody close to the victim. First of all, I'm gonna put on. I'm literally putting on my true crime podcast host hat. True crime podcast host hat. It's literally on my head. Uh, if you know anything about how these things work, the first person you look at when somebody is murdered, especially if it's a woman, or even if it's a man, you look at their romantic partner, you look at their spouse, you look at, um, and because more often than not, that's the person that killed them.
Yeah,
We always have these these things in our head of the serial killers and the stranger, the lone stranger, but most people who are murdered know their murderer. The victim and the perpetrator are known to one another, and especially when you're talking about women.
Yeah.
In the big plurality of women who are murdered by their romantic partner. Um, and murder is a little strong here, because when people think murder, they think premeditated things and stuff like that. It seems likely to me, and obviously this is me putting conjecture out, that things got heated. Um, Little spoiler for the Murder My Dude episode that's coming out at midnight. We do a game at the end, who died the worst, where we take 3 odd deaths and we determine which of the people died the worst. Little spoiler for the people watching this. One of the deaths this week was a bar fight in Australia where the brother of a, I believe, like a rugby team or a soccer team manager, his brother got in a bar fight with a professional surfer. They got into an argument. The surfer got punched in the face, got knocked out, and hit his head on the concrete on the landing and died.
Happens more often than you think.
And that guy wasn't throwing that punch saying, "I'm going to kill this guy." Like,
He was just. That's why I always say, man, like, we had an incident like that happened a few times just in our local area, and it makes you think, like, man, is it really worth throwing that punch? Because anything can happen. Anything. You hit that guy and you get your instant gratification, but then that guy falls and hits his head, or breaks his neck, or hurts his back, and now you're in a lawsuit for the rest of your life. But
yeah,
one other thing I want to touch on here, where I don't want to place blame or say anyone's at any point in time wrong here, but also at this point in time too, it's not a secret that it was a time where kind of laying your hands on a woman wasn't always frowned upon, we'll say, especially in certain cultures and certain times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rock and roll stars, bikers, and wrestlers were all in the same kind of category, where that kind of stuff was just, and when, like you said, it was kind of looked the other way. Like, these are testosterone filled men who are probably on drugs and alcohol, who would take their anger out on, after they took their things, on their women, and it was kind of part of the business, which, once again, hopefully that has changed because of the progression of this industry.
And just as a society, we now look at things like, we talked about drunk driving earlier. We talk about, now let's talk about domestic abuse. It's not, it's treated as the serious deal it should have been treated as the whole time.
Yeah.
And that is something that has changed in the last 40 years. It's something, we're coming up on 40 years since this case happened. So yeah, that is something that is absolutely, like, if this would have happened today, there would have been a much deeper investigation into it.
Absolutely.
If this would have happened May 11th, 2003 or 2022, I think it would be, well, first of all, it would be all over social media.
You can't tell that to a family who lost a family member and say,
"Oh no, of course,
it sucks you lost your family, but look how far we've come as society, that hopefully this wouldn't happen again."
And it seems like, just from our experience, now it's big front page news, and it's talked about ad nauseum, because last night before AEW Dynamite, a guy punched another guy in the locker room. And that is now a scandal in wrestling. And that probably happened every other weekend back then.
Yeah. Guy punched the guy, and then the guy who gets punched can seem as being the bad guy because he was in a fight a couple weeks before that.
Yeah. I guess it's very punchable.
He has a very punchable face, I guess. Yeah. But so that essentially that's gonna do it for the most part for this case, right?
Yeah. If you want to look into it, there's a lot of great stuff out there. The Dark Side of the Ring episode is a really good resource here. There's a really good article for Mel Magazine, which David Bixenspan, who is one of the he's written about wrestling for Deadspin and a few other things. He has a great article called "Who Failed Nancy Argentino," and it's really just looking at the way this was horribly mishandled by the Lehigh Valley Police. Horribly mishandled. Obviously they didn't kill her. Obviously they're not the perpetrator here, but if you want to look at the injustice side of it, that's on them. That is on them 100%.
Well,
and
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, and then just one other person I want to mention, and we already talked to him, and he's been very close to the Argentino family. I wouldn't say he's given you I hate to use this line because the people who put it in the lexicon or anything, but he doesn't exactly give you a fair and balanced look at the case. He is very much on the side of the Argentino family and Nancy, and very against Jimmy Snuka. But Irv Mushnick also wrote a book. I've never read it, but Irv Mushnick is the person who really kept this case alive when it was really very much under the rug. He wrote a book called Justice Denied, the untold story of Nancy Argentino's death in Jimmy Superfly Snuka's motel room.
Yeah,
You can tell there's an agenda by the title.
We're saying he's biased, but we're also saying he's biased against legit a murder that was never taken care of properly the first time. You know what I mean? So sure, there's emotions and their angers there because he's like, why wasn't this dealt with the right way the first time?
Oh yeah, and obviously the Argentino family.
I don't want to make this dude seem like he's the villain.
No.
No, I'm saying
absolutely not. Yeah. No, Irv Mushnick is the reason that
if I die and it's weird, I want a Mushnick on my side. You know what I mean? Like I want someone to look into it.
He's the reason that people are even still talking about this case. Well, him and the Argentino family, of course.
Mushnick hates wrestlers and wrestlers.
That's Phil Mushnick. That different Mushnick.
Yeah, different Mushnick.
Yeah, Phil Mushnick is a writer for the New York Post, and he's the one that was always writing about WWF and the steroid scandal and everything. Yeah. This is a different Mushnick. Irv Mushnick has written things about the Benoit case, about this, about a few other things. And yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is
there's a problem too with wrestling fans, and I'll use this case and the one we just said, Benoit, as an example. We have wrestling fans who believe that they didn't do it because they were fans of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just like, listen, we love this business, and we want to say our heroes were our favorite of all time. But when your hero does something, you got to step back and be like, listen, my guy never committed a crime that we know of. Or he got charged for
it. I think not that level of crime.
But I'm very also aware that like during that time that it's not cool, but it has been done. And some of my favorite wrestlers were scumbags back in the day. You know what I mean? Like, it's why I kind of attach myself with more people these days, and I do a little research on them first. Like, are they good people? And we live in a time now where you can kind of do your homework, where if a wrestler's openly to put himself on social media or put himself out there, it's like, oh, he probably has a lot less to hide because he's willing to be himself other places. And that wasn't a thing in professional wrestling or sports back then.
Yeah, you very much had to inhabit your character. Yeah. It's so funny because I was watching right before this, I watched that Tales from the Territories about Memphis.
I gotta start watching that.
How many episodes are in? That was the first episode. They're just the one episode in, and they do it in the round table. It's all people who are involved in Memphis. It's Dutch Mantel, Jeff Jarrett, Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, and Jimmy Hart is on there.
Yeah,
and Jimmy Hart is talking about being carried out of the ring after a match, and he feels this pain. And he felt like somebody threw hot coffee and hit him in the butt with it. But he gets to the back.
He was stabbed.
Somebody made a blowgun and like blew a needle into him. Yeah, he had to go get like a tetanus shot.
Bro, that's terrifying.
Jimmy Hart was such a hated heel, and then
wasn't Piper stabbed by an old lady?
Yeah, a lot of people were stabbed. Yeah, like the old ladies used to stab him with hat pins. But no, Piper got stabbed by somebody, I believe. Yeah, but like. We've met Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart's the nicest man that ever lived. Like,
he got blowgun darted,
yeah.
But let's wrap this up here. If you enjoyed this and thought Brian did a fantastic job, I will implore you to please go check out Murder My Dude. He does an amazing job like this bi-weekly and has been doing it for about 4 years now. He's, you know what I mean?
October is going to be 4 because we started the first ever.
We started our podcast journey without knowing about each other around the same time.
Yeah, our first episode was about the first movie in this new Halloween trilogy that's going to be ending this year.
And my first podcast that was recorded as like a test with our equipment was reviewing the Halloween movie.
Yeah, that's the first episode of Murder My Dude too.
Yeah,
that's a wild coincidence.
It's crazy.
But yeah, we do have a new episode coming out at midnight. And we kind of are covering the story that created the true crime genre. It's the story of the Clutter family murders. If you've ever watched the movie Capote or read the book In Cold Blood, these murders became very famous because the author, the writer, Truman Capote, came to this little town in Kansas where it happened, interviewed all the people that were around, the killers, and the surviving family members of the people who were massacred. So we talk about that story, and we also talk about the story that kind of brought true crime podcasting as a big thing. The serial case. Adnan Syed was recently freed from prison, and we talk about it.
Yeah. So all the links are below. You can follow Murder My Dude on all social media: Facebook, YouTube, or Facebook. There's a YouTube account, I think, but
I don't think
it's
it's
on
been updated in years. So.
Facebook.
We're not so good at the social media thing.
Yeah, Facebook.
I'm still bitter that our True Social got deleted.
Yeah. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also you can find them on Spotify, anywhere you can find podcasts, and you can go to projecthumanoid.com and follow along when it comes to their merchandise or anything they have going on there. Support them. Listen, Brian, me, like I said, we both started this journey of content creating and podcasting. He started way before this, but he started Murder My Dude around the same time I started my journey into this. We somehow met each other, realized how much we have in common, became close friends. And
I think
been
the
on
first time I ever did a wrestling show was in 2005. So it's been a while.
Yeah, you've been at this been at this for a minute, but please, I know that tornado tag's not a thing anymore, but we will continue to try to keep this a thing. Once again, we'd love to have people come up with topics. If you want us to review a show, you want us to talk about a topic like this, you want us
maybe something fun. Maybe we could talk about, I don't know.
Hint, hint. This is your time to put stuff in the comments. But yeah, so I do have a show that I want to review that we already talked about in the docket that's supposed to be happening on Tornado Tag, and we're going to make sure it happens very soon. It was a wrestling show that happened in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. We're going to talk about the Jakara show that happened in Goodfellas Warehouse. If you're local, you're like, what? Wait till you see who is on this card. It's going to be fun. If you want to check it out, we will put the links below that you can watch it on IWTV. That'll be there. But we do want to have guests on. So if you're in the business or if you're a podcaster yourself, we want people on. We want to talk to people. We want you to put over your thing. I know CR Meaty in the chats from Kansas, and he wants us to possibly watch a show from one of his promotions that he likes to go to. I believe it's on YouTube. And then they're going to join us on reviewing that show. So we have a lot of fun content that's coming soon. And if it's not wrestling related stuff, we have movie reviews coming, video games, comic book stuff, music. So a cool thing we're doing soon is getting Converse Kid, who's in the chat, who says I love Brian. He gave me an album to listen to. I got about two or three songs in. We're gonna listen to the full. I'm gonna listen to the full album, and then we're gonna talk about that album. And he's gonna talk about his favorite tracks, what this album means to him. So we're gonna have some music stuff like that. It's gonna be all encompassing. There's gonna be a lot of stuff that you're gonna see on this channel, and I'm very excited about that. Also been doing a lot of video game streams. Even if you're not into the game, come hang out in the chat. The chat has been unbelievable, even at 2:00 in the morning. Somehow we're like, there's 15 people in there. And they're all
I can't be doing that.
I know.
On Monday,
saying, yeah.
I fell asleep on Monday at 9:30.
What I'm saying is we normally have a nice crowd of people in there, even without announcing it, and they have really good conversations. So even if you're not into the video game being played, join the conversation. We have a really good time in the chats. Thank everybody for that support, but it's been amazing. But yes, once again, Murder My Dude links are below. Please follow them. Reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts and Spotify help out a lot, so make sure you do that. And show them support. Comment on their latest post on social media and say ABJ sent you. You know what I mean? That's what we're gonna try to do if we put people over, is send them that way and tell them that the old ABJ has been there. But anything else, Brian, you want to cover? Talk about?
No, I saw in the chat Chris Benoit. Look, can we stop with the? I like the crossover with the murder podcast, but I talk about murder enough.
Let's give a little break to Benoit. We'll do some other things, but let's.
It wasn't Kevin Sullivan. That's all I'll say.
It was not Kevin Sullivan.
It wasn't Kevin Sullivan. Don't believe don't believe that one.
I'll say it was CTE. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I have watched countless accounts on this case, and this is the best one I've seen. Well done, gents. So we're glad we did it justice. You requested it, and I would have been here sooner, but somebody else is streaming. No problem. Enjoy all those streams. CR Media says great show.
Language.
Yeah, I didn't say. I just said afraid. I kind of. Yeah.
What's on the screen?
Yes. Well, if you can't read, it's on you. Robert Blake, he said, was a case.
I don't think we did Robert Blake.
You
We're
you did
we're
Dahmer, right?
yeah, we did a cannibals episode.
You should.
That
Yeah.
was early on when
Did
we
you watch
did.
the Netflix show?
No, I
It's
can't.
really good. It's really good.
I still have to finish watching Mindhunters. Like,
Yeah, I finished that. Yeah.
I have one thing on my Netflix agenda. It's coming out tomorrow, and I'm gonna be dialed
What's
in.
that?
My favorite reality show of all time is coming back after like 16 years, and I am all about The Mole.
The
I
Mole.
love The Mole, and The Mole is coming back tomorrow.
Absolutely great show. Loved it. Great job, guys. Enjoyed it. Educate these whippersnappers who thinks it's rigged. I still want botch analysis. I said the botch analysis can be something we do, but I also don't want to. I'm not a big fan of the term botch because you have to realize what they go through when they're in there, and mistakes happen, and to try to take them down for it, it's hard to do, especially if you're close to the business and you've been seeing as much as we've seen. Those things happen. That's part of the project, you know. This podcast is awesome. Thank you. Robert Blake played in Cold Blood movie. That's why I brought it up.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be an interesting one. That's an interesting case.
Yeah. But once again, what a blast. If you want to hang out with us this weekend, there's plenty of opportunities to do so.
Yeah.
There's 3 to be made. So if you're not doing anything Friday night, come with us to the Sanctuary in Hazleton. We will be there watching some professional wrestling. I don't know who exactly is wrestling or what's going on.
Yeah, I believe it's like the first Friday.
Yeah, first Fridays are usually just like wrestlers show up and they put a card together, and it's very thrown together, but it's a really fun time. That's theater meets professional wrestling at its finest. You're gonna see cool lights, music. It's a blast. It's super cheap. It's like $5 to get in. Come hang out at the Sanctuary with us. All the details are the Sanctuary PATV. It is linked in the promotions I follow.
And
if
then
you're
there's
not
gonna be
local,
a more formal show on Sunday, the Ruler of the Ring.
yeah, so there'll be Friday and Sunday. And if
Probably
you're
heard
not
this
local,
before, it's an 8-person tournament where the winner gets a crown at the end.
yeah, interesting.
The Ruler of the Ring.
And
And the best part about it, Savio Vega will not wrestle 4 times.
I'm not coming now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Look, I'll stay home and watch the Eagles. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm loving the Eagles right now.
Forget what I was gonna say. Yeah, the most high-powered second quarter offense of all time.
That's all you need sometimes. That's all you need sometimes.
If they're that good, they put points up all 4 quarters. Anyway,
are you really
our team? Listen, our team is fine. Our quarterback just needs to let go of the ball. But if you're not local and you want to watch the Sanctuary,
hard to look at the ball, you're getting sacked 9 times.
He held on to it for 19 steps. Yeah.
You don't think I know that? You don't think I had to watch that for years?
Sanctuary is amazing, and that's coming from Outbreak Wrestling. Yeah. All the promotions are below. So if you're on our main page of YouTube, there's a tab I have that says friends to follow. Make sure you go follow all those accounts. We're all about showing love to people. So you'll see Converse Kid, Pete DeLong, Tantalizing Tony. Follow those accounts, and then there's another tab underneath that says wrestling promotions I have done commentary for, and everyone's there, like Outbreak and Sanctuary. You can follow them. Sanctuary is free and on YouTube every single time they go live, so you can tune in and watch absolutely free if you're not from the area, or you can come hang out live. And
you
then
can mock
Saturday,
those bad announcers too.
We are adding more of an element to the stream where we can talk to you. Like we will interact with the chat while we're doing commentary. It's brand new. We're going to have some fun with it. So if you want to interact with us while we do wrestling commentary, Sanctuary PATV is where you need to be. And then Saturday, we'll be back in Broadheadville, Pennsylvania for PPW Eyes Wide Open. And we're going to be hanging out with Brian Cage.
Yeah. They finally put him on TV, and now he's going to be at PPW.
No,
if you watch that match, you're like, what the hell have I been doing this guy for all this time?
He's so good.
Like, that match was so good, and it's like, I wish they would have done something to make me care more about it, other than these 2 really talented guys are having a really good match. And it's
unfortunately because that match was essentially, okay, well, this is why we're sticking with Wardlow, because he's the guy we're running with, and probably not going to use Brian Cage until ROH becomes a thing again.
Yeah, it's too many people.
I think ROH is closer than we think.
I hope so. It would be.
They're doing a lot of handshaking, a lot of ROH stuff. They're really, really putting it over. And I think we might go. You
got to respect that code of honor.
Yeah, we might be going into the new TV deal with your favorite as the ROH champion.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, let's see him win a goddamn match first.
Yeah, that's it.
It's like, oh yeah, Danielson's a match. Well, he's gonna lose.
He's against Jericho. Yeah. But yeah, so that's everything professional wrestling. Maybe we'll jump on at some point Friday. We'll see, maybe later on in the day, or maybe we'll do something later on. It definitely won't be Saturday, but maybe we'll do an Extreme Rules prediction show. But we'll wait till maybe SmackDown. If you're up to staying up a little later Friday, we can do it after we get back
Are you gonna
from
be at the Sanctuary on Friday?
After Sanctuary, we'll go home and
Oh.
we'll jump on and do it if you want.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't.
Also, I want to put out here. Let me do a screen share. Where are we at here? That's not what I want. Doing it on the fly. Present screen. StreamYard. Allow. Here it is. You can join us on Pro Wrestling Scorecards. I changed the faction. It's now the ABJ podcast faction because unfortunately Tornado Tag isn't a thing. But you can jump on here and you can pick your card. It opens in 16 hours and pick your things. Now, when you join this, you go to factions up top. You click on the ABJ podcast and you're in. And once you're in, you can see who's all been the champions and who's all doing great. Previous cards, previous winners, statistics. This guy might be you, Brian.
Yeah,
14 reigns, 21 wins. With PA Pile Driver, tied up with Andy Header, followed by Dark Knight, and then me there hanging out 5-5. Whenever I manage to pretend remember to do my cards. But you can join our stable, hang out with us. It's a lot of fun. Our current AEW champion is Brian. Impact champ is Andy. NFL is the Maestro, because I think he's the only one that played.
I think so, yeah.
New Japan is Dark Knight. NWA is Andy Header. PCW, Ryan Buck. I didn't even know that was a card to do. ROH is Blinker, followed by Header. And WWE's champion right now is you, Brian.
Yes.
So you can join us on Pro Wrestling Scorecards. And also make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, 168. What I was telling you earlier is friends to follow. Here it is on the very bottom. These are the accounts you can check out. And here's the companies I've worked for: PPW, Sanctuary, Outbreak, High Tension, Independent Wrestling Television, Fight, Shore Star Standalone, and IWA. So there's all the great promotions you can check out. And it's all in one place for you guys. So thank you for the support. And also, last thing, right up above me here, see that little ghost guy? That's Discord. We have a brand new Discord. There's over 30 people in it. The Discord is absolutely killing it. We have rooms for every single thing you're into, I promise. You can check out, let me see if I can pull it up and it works. You can check out great things that we're doing on there. Let's see, allow. Will this work? Is Discord there? Can you see it?
I can.
All right. So we have, streams, podcasts, professional wrestling, TV and music, horror, video games, comic book, music, beers, bars and breweries, sports, paranormal, figures, gear, equipment, a little tab if you want to self-promote yourself, suggestions tab, and merch and support. We also have video and audio rooms that you can hang out in, depending if you want to talk to. We have a lot of people. Link is also in the link tree that you can come hang out. Yeah, we're doing cool things.
Discord is one of those social media things like TikTok that makes me feel my age a little bit.
Dude, it's really fun.
I'm not young anymore. That's right. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. You got to check it out. But that's going to do it here for our stream tonight. Thank you all for hanging out. Please let us know in the comment section or head over to the Discord, and in the suggestions. Tell us what you want to see done on this show soon. We have, like I said, show reviews, interviews. We have a lot of cool things we can do. Tag maybe your favorite person you want to see. Maybe we'll interview them. We were open to collaboration. So we're pumped that this is now our second inaugural episode. The first one did really well, over 100 plays, which is
awesome. I'm a draw. What can I say?
You are the guy. That's why I keep you around. But that's going to do it. Here's some Billy Trey. We're out of here.